Welcome inside another edition of SVG Rewind, the series that takes a look back at some of the more exciting live sports productions from the year. On this episode, we're taking a look back at the 2023 National Women's Soccer League Draft. And to do that, we are joined by Brian Gordon. He's the SVP, Executive Producer of Broadcast and Media for the NWSL. The draft just ended last week. It was on January 12th in Philadelphia at the Pennsylvania Convention Center. Brian, thanks so much for taking the opportunity to reflect on this show with us. Great to see you. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Very excited to relive what was a fun draft for all of us.
Yeah, it was a great show. It was last Thursday. As we mentioned, it was in Philadelphia. The first hour was on CBS Sports Network and also streamed on Paramount Plus and CBS Sports HQ. And then the rest of the draft after the first hour continued on Paramount Plus and CBS Sports HQ. Drafts, full disclosure, are fascinating productions to me. I love talking about drafts. I love watching drafts. Any league, anywhere, sign me up. I want to learn about how the draft was produced. So it's a live show. It relies heavily on pre-production work. You're talking about gathering a big library of video assets that could be deployed at any moment. There's a big bulk of graphics creation. So let's break this up into two parts for the audience, and let's start with the work that's done in advance leading up. What did your team do and they needed to get done in advance of heading to Philly for the event itself? And then we can get into the live event itself from last week. So take us inside the amount of work that had to go into preparing for this thing.
So as you said, you're creating an event from scratch, from nothing. I mean, there's nothing really to cover. You're manufacturing news based on who the draftees are and who the potential draftees are. Number one for us is you don't know who's participating until the draft deadline, which was Monday.
Oh, wow.
Last year, Monday before the draft. Last year, before the last draft that we did before I got there, the deadline was midnight before the day of the draft. So everybody who worked on the draft said, Brian, we got to change this. Please, can we back it up, as much as possible so we can at least get our graphics and all our pre-pro ready. So that was a win for us. We worked with our operations team. So knowing that deadline was Monday the night before, now you back up and we opened our draft, I believe in December for signups or November. So every 2 days, our operations team would be updating this list. First week, there were 5 draftees. Second week, there's 10. Third week, there's 15. No, we took a break after Christmas. We had to wait for NCAA championships. So the biggest thing we're focused on is who are the potential draft picks and when are they signing up? Because we have to gather all this material. We have to reach out to the conferences. We have to reach out to the schools. We have to reach out to get headshots, bio information, video, you name it. And we don't know who it is until, a few days before the event. So we spent a ton of time working our contacts across the NCAA, all the schools, our comms team. We work with agents. We work with PR directors, everybody. We also have to forecast, we have a Mel Kiper in our group. If you want to use that as a good choice.
Sure,
Jen
good
Cooper.
benchmark.
Yeah, benchmark. Jen Cooper is our researcher, and she's the one who works on these lists of compiling who the draftees are, who are the best available, and taking all that information. So that changed every day. It's not like somebody in these other drafts where you have a month to prepare. We have a very short window. And also with the Christmas break, we lost a lot of time on our videos. We had over 200 players that we had to try to track. And that's a record for us. We've never had this much interest. A lot of that had to do with the COVID years and athletes getting that extra year. And so having to have that many draftees, potential draft picks, to go through, gather information, find out everything, share that with everybody that needs to know from a graphic standpoint. Internally, we had an in-house show, and we have our broadcast, which are 2 different graphics looks. One is a CBS brand, one's the NWSL brand. So you're essentially making double of everything.
Sure.
So you're making double of everything going in blind. So we spent a ton of time. That's on the content side. On the technical side, we usually partner with the soccer coaches. This is part of the United Soccer Coaches Convention. So we work with them on the stage, work with them on production. There's construction that was happening down there. So we did 2 different site surveys. We partnered with with Vista, who normally does our production for our NWSL games. They hired John Brown and Freedom Productions, JB and team to execute. That's for on-site. So that's our cameras, that's our returns, that's our integration with the on-site team at Harvest. And then we work with CBS up in Stamford at their HQ headquarters. So those two teams got together. I know enough on the technical side to be dangerous. And as the person who's in charge of the budget, that was my big fear. An interesting note is we didn't get our street permit to park the truck until the night before the event, the 2 nights before, and it had to get approved by the mayor of Philadelphia. So those were the types of things that our team was the challenges that you have of doing an inner city TV show in downtown Philly, center city, I think is the right term, of that whole technical side, the cable runs. It's not built for television. How are we doing our cable runs? How are we doing phone lines? It's very specific on what you need to go back to CBS HQ. So all of that technical and content pre-production has been happening. We started probably in July with our first call regarding technical. And then once we knew when the draft window opened for draftees to sign up in December, that's when we really hit it hard on the content side.
Sure. So for someone who's curious, what's it like to work at the event last Thursday when you guys produced this thing? Yeah, you kind of teased it a little bit there. This was a REMI production. So you've got resources and personnel both in Philly and up in Stamford at CBS Sports' facility there. Give us a lowdown. So you got the control room up in Connecticut. You got a studio set down in Philly. You got camera ops. You got people working in the control room. What was kind of the distribution of resources on event night?
So on the event night, I was the only NWSL person not at the draft versus everybody else on our team because we needed someone in the control room. So I'll start with the control room first. So I play air traffic control in the control room, and I'm talking to our ops department and I'm talking to production in Philly. And the reason for that is they're tipping me on when the pick is in. So that whole process of when the pick is in and then prepping everybody who's on site with our commissioner, Jessica Berman, on pronunciation, all the way back to letting the control room know, do you have a graphic? Do you have a highlight? Letting the talent know. Our researcher, Jen Cooper, on site, it has a Google Doc that is tipping off the pick to the talent. So the responsibilities, all of the integration was up in Stamford with, again, I was the air traffic controller. Then down in Philadelphia, all of our talent and below the line, and we had one production person, Meg Buchan, our director of production, who was facilitating conversations from a production standpoint of when to cue Jessica, trades are coming. She was eyes and ears on the ground. And I would say, as a REMI production, it was a true REMI meeting. 99% of the technical team that needed to pull this off was down in Philly, truck, cameras, audio, and then everybody else was in Stamford. That's how we broke up the responsibilities.
Okay, and in terms of the map, kind of in the conference room itself, how many cameras did you deploy there? I mean, like you said, you're covering essentially a podium for the most part, in addition to your studio set. So, how many cameras did you really have to put out there? How many mics do you need to throw down? What's kind of the deal?
So we had 3 cameras at the booth for our talent. We had 2 cameras that were at that would shoot the podium, a wide and a tight. We had 2 handhelds. Those handhelds one was assigned to Marissa Pillow for interviews, and the other one was assigned to players for that part of the draft. And then they would wander as needed in between draft picks. Then we had a high wide camera, and then we had a clock cam. So the one thing with our draft, because we're in separate places, we spent the money, and it cost money to do this, to put one camera and one feed that was a clock so that everybody else so all teams were in sync on the clock. We don't have an automated. There's a laptop backstage that is operations that they tell them when to run the clock. That clock then is shown in the room, and we wanted to make sure that the clock in the room drove what was on television, because if those two were off, it would have been a disaster. So we had one clock cam coming back from the room. So that was the component in the room. From a microphone standpoint, again, we had up to 5 talent mics the day before. So we were going to use stick mics, but the talent said they don't want to hold a stick mic for 4 hours. So luckily, our engineering team found Madonna mics, or we called them. There was an interesting nickname that we called them. I think Maradona mics.
Oh, okay.
Because it's soccer versus Madonna mics.
I like it.
So that's something that was something that we needed because we got to take care of our talent. The one thing that I will say from an operations standpoint, this was the fastest draft we've ever done. Previous drafts where we've executed, we've let the talent go. They've been able to talk. And, even though a pick was in, we would let them finish their points, even if they were rambling, which is obviously you want that content. But because of the length of our draft, and we have timeouts in our draft, so the third round took forever this year because of these 3-minute timeouts. And Shaw Brown and I, as soon as the pick was in, just pushing the announcers, telling Poppy Miller, our host, all right, and anybody else who's making a point, let's get to the draft pick. They had 15 seconds to wrap, and then we go. So I think from start to finish, we were right at 4 hours. Previously, we've been 5+. So that was from a viewer standpoint,
Nice.
And the time we needed to cut, we really, really whizzed through it. And then communications was much better. I think on our operations standpoint, we were using the technology that we could to be able to execute much faster.
Okay, very cool. All right, let's reflect on some of the highlights from the show itself. The number one overall pick, we'll start right at the top. Angel City FC selected a high school player, Alyssa Thompson. She's still in high school right now, but she's from LA, so that's an incredible storyline for you guys right there. She's probably a different story because she's phenom status. There's footage of her playing. She debuted for the U.S. women's national team last year. But how did you go about collecting B-roll and elements for her? And were there any other players that were tricky to track down media for? I mean, there's so much going on at the collegiate level now. I mean, all the major conferences are streaming games on a regular basis. There's so much content that's there for you to get. But for high school players or international players or anything like that, how hard is that to find media for?
So I'll start with the first pick. So we were alerted to the first pick. Obviously, Angel City made the big draft and wanted that player, wanted Alyssa. And so we found out that she was going to be at Nike, and we thought, okay, let's do a Zoom or a Skype, and she can sit down. And then Angel City got back to us and said, no, there is a huge production that's happening. Her family's going to be there. She's going to meet some players. We're going to do Julia Ehrman from Angel City FC, one of the co-founders, is going to be there. So then on Tuesday before the draft, I contacted Told Right and said, hey, I need a live view because we need to make this bigger and better because that's the information that we had. This all went down last week. So we ended up getting a live view and made that, what that moment that everyone has seen was because of the additional investment we made, and we were able to capture that and execute it, in a pretty short turnaround. So she was great. Getting footage was not difficult. We have a great relationship with U.S. Soccer. So that was an easy one. Once we made the call, we had that footage in a few minutes. I think the other part for us is, if you look at our draft, Power 5 schools, SEC, ACC, and Pac-12, Meg on my team cut video rights deals with them. And we had, that part was honestly easier than it's been in the past. And based on the time and where they were in the draft, that was our priority. We grabbed that footage, and the CBS HQ team turned that around on our behalf. The other thing that's interesting is, and I think this is a story, I talked to someone about this over the weekend at All Sports, are the local content captures. Every school now, their kids are shooting high frame rate, low frame rate, different arts and crafts, not just a game melt. So when you reached out to these schools, the level of the quality of footage is not just high, wide, camera 1, camera 2, or low. They usually have 4 cameras covering games. It was low angle. It was stylish. It looked really good, and was meant more for eye candy than it was, strategy and talking about, players' plus and minuses. We really treated the player B-roll much more as wallpaper, so our talent could expand on what their opinions were of each player. So we didn't have that much trouble with the Power 5 schools, and that's what we focused on. On the international side, most of the international players are a lot of them played at those Power 5 schools just because of the depth of what NCAA is this year. So the crunch was just not knowing who we needed and when, and then getting all of this footage in and turning it around in the short amount of time.
Yeah, it's amazing how much is out there now. I mean, if you produced this event 10 years ago, it's a totally different ball game. You probably don't have footage for a majority of the players that are in it. Now it's like, not only do you have almost, if not all of the college players, you got a good chunk of high school players too. I mean, you could probably dig up footage of like 10-year-olds probably if you wanted. That's another story, but it's amazing how much is out there right now for you guys to mine.
It's great. So the other part of it is, and this was interesting that Jen Cooper, our researcher, brought this up, is a pronunciation guide. So part of your draft registration process, you had to upload how you pronounced your name. So the broadcasters going in, I mean, how many times does a broadcaster ask, how do you say this? What do you do? We didn't have a pronunciation guide for 260 250 players.
Right.
So having that audio file was huge. And then even backstage, Commissioner Berman, when she was getting ready, could hear and listen to the audio of what the player said, so she can make that pronunciation. And when they wrote the chord, so they made the pronunciation. That was written on a card, and she knew what it was. So a very small detail, but it was key for us in execution. We don't want to offend our players by mispronouncing their names.
Oh yeah, of course. This is potentially the biggest moment in their entire life. You want to do them that respect. That's a small detail that goes a long way. Look, another wild card that always seems to emerge on draft days in any league are trades. And boy, you had quite a few of them this year. It was a record 12 draft day trades for the NWSL draft, and included a big one that moved the number 2 overall pick to Kansas City and Lynn Williams, who's another U.S. women's national team player, to New Jersey, New York. That one, literally, I was watching the draft. It sent an audible gasp through the room in Philadelphia. I think that one shocked a lot of people. But just structurally, how does a show like yours prepare for those? You know they're going to come. You just don't know in what capacity and who they're going to involve. But what wheels go into motion when a trade comes down, and how do you prepare the skeleton for when they happen?
So it's really having a great relationship with our ops team and our legal team, because that's where trades start. I think the casual viewer thinks, oh, it's just a team and a trade and this and that. But what happens is a team has to send a piece of paper to the league that says, here's what we want to do. The league has to vet that trade. But what happens is we get tipped on it by our operations team and our comms team. So we knew about all of those, depending on the timing. We knew the big one we found out about, I think, 3 or 4 in the afternoon. It wasn't one that was a huge surprise for us. We were ready to go. And again, that's because of our relationship with our ops team. So our skeleton, the workflow is ops gets something. They send us the actual draft sheet / contract. It's going to be the contract that has all these watermarks on it. Has everybody seen it? And then we send that out in extreme confidentiality to research, to graphics, to our producers, so that they know what's coming. And then everybody is prepared. Again, this is all under extreme secrecy, because if, even our talent was talking about something in rehearsal, and I kept saying, one of the trades, I kept saying, no, don't say anything. What I found out later is that the teams had actually publicized it even before we did.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So then they could talk about it. On the trades that happened when we were on the air, I think there was one that was a surprise to us, because in the communication side, I think it was so busy I missed it. Our trade was in, because I was the conduit in the control room of what was happening. So we end up having this workflow because of our trust with the operations and the comms teams to let broadcast know so that we can get ahead.
Okay. Less technical and purely storyline, because that was kind of a tricky storytelling moment for your team and Shaw Brown and everything, because the first overall pick and that trade, the number 2 pick trade, essentially got announced by Commissioner Jessica Berman at the same time. Like, it was one trip to the podium. So on one hand, you don't want to steal Alyssa's moment, but you also just had a huge trade go down. You got a 4-hour show, and essentially, arguably, the 2 biggest moments happened within 5 seconds of each other. So how did the French bench navigate juggling those 2 huge things at once?
So, and I'm going to relive this moment with you. So pick happens, we're waiting for the reaction. And then as that's happening, we're listening to what's to the commissioner's trade. And we decided our number 1 pick and our star, that's the priority.
Sure.
Because there was that moment of, what do we do? Do we talk about Lynn? Do we wait? Well, we had Alyssa waiting for an interview and waiting for that reaction. And we wanted to do that interview. So that was our number 1 focus. And what you just said, we have 3 more hours to talk about Lynn Williams in the trade.
Sure.
So there was a point, and I think Poppy played it great if you go back and watch it, we put the period on Alyssa and then went to talk about the trade. And then we had to get to that next pick. I don't think we went in as in depth as we would have with Lynn Williams and what that meant.
Sure.
But again, because that was the number 1 pick in the story, and there was that moment, everybody was like, wait a sec, what do we do? And Sean and I looked at each other and said, focus on the number 1 pick. We have time. Let's take care of that, and then we can move on.
Beauty of live television, right?
and that's the fun part. That to me, that's the best part of, I have to make a split-second decision, make sure everybody in the room knows. And Shaw, thankfully, has done this enough to be able to get the announcers' ears to say, here's your focus, here's what we need to do, and really drive the ship.
Okay. Those two moments are obviously very early in the draft. It's essentially the first two moves of
Yep.
the entire draft and the first two moments of a show that, as you mentioned, went about 4 hours. So outside of those, as a producer, do you have a favorite moment from the show? Is there a moment that you look back on and think, man, us in the control room or the studio talent really nailed that?
Yeah, I think it was, and I can't remember which draft. There were two moments to me. One is number one, when Michelle King, the owner of the Washington Spirit, surprised us
Mhm.
and met her player that she drafted at the stage and wanted to take a picture.
Oh,
The
cool.
Washington Spirit draft table was right in the lane of the players. So that was, to me, she was the only owner that did that, who was in attendance that night. And that made the player feel extra special. And then we had another player who was crying on camera. I think it was even during the third round, who was just so moved by being drafted, had worked so hard, wasn't sure that she was going to get drafted. So I think, to me, and I'm all, for my favorite moments throughout my entire career are when the athletes are moved and I can be
Mhm.
part of that experience and share that with the viewer. We've all been around great plays. You've all been around amazing things, but when you can get that emotion right away from that player and it's a life-changing moment and you're there and bring that out, because I've been around a lot of life-changing moments that people haven't seen on camera. So to be around those that we can put on camera is just spectacular. And those are my two favorite moments. And the last favorite moment was when we were done at 10:15, knowing that it was the fastest draft ever, because everybody was going in saying, "Oh my goodness, this is going to be 5 hours or 5.5," which
Mhm.
we've done in the past. Those are my favorite moments.
Yeah, that's like I always I'm always happy for the like the award show hosts or the producers of award shows when they actually end like at the top of the hour. You're
Yep,
like, man, that good for them, good for them.
exactly.
From your perspective, obviously you're someone who's worked in the industry for a while, and I say that respectfully, going back to ABC Sports days and everything like
Yep.
that. But how much experience do you have with drafts, and how do you describe them to someone who works in the industry that maybe hasn't worked on one before or wants to work on one someday? Outside of everything that we've talked about already, what makes them a unique, fun thing to work on?
I think it goes back to what I just said. These are life-changing moments
Mhm.
for players, and they're also defining moments for teams, because a team is investing in a player so that they get better, and it's a foundation for them because they want to win a championship. For a player, it's a player has been entrusted by a team. Wow, they're choosing me. They want me and my skill set and my personality to be able to make a change and try to win a championship.
Mhm.
So the melding of those two things, that's what makes a draft. From my standpoint, all the other leagues, every league has a big draft, and depending on your budget is how what the hoopla is or not. But strip away that. If you stripped away all of the LEDs and all of the steady cams and all of the graphics, there's a there's a team asking a player to join my team, and hopefully the melding of those two things changes both of their paths forever. And that's really what the importance of a draft is to me and what makes them great.
That's fun. All right, Brian, it's been awesome reflecting on with you on this NWSL draft. Before you go, just kind of wanted to ask you about what you and your team are up to right now. We use the term off-season tongue-in-cheek. Obviously, when you work at a league or for a team, there really never is one. But this is a big off-season for the league. You're coming off of a record ratings number for the NWSL Championship, a game that Portland won, 915,000 viewers. The game was on primetime on a broadcast network on CBS. There's currently rights negotiations that are going on with CBS and potentially others. The league's current broadcast rights deal with CBS and Twitch expires at the end of this 2023 season. I won't get into the specifics. I won't ask you about that specifically. Purely from your league office perspective, you produce all of your own matches. So what are you and your team focusing on that you are looking forward to bringing to live match production next year, or this year, I should say?
So real quick, just one correction. So our Twitch deal is already done.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
So which is, again, this is something that we have to educate people on, and we will. All of our Twitch matches now domestically move to Paramount Plus.
Okay.
So thankfully, we'll have 152 of our streaming matches all on P Plus. Makes life much easier from a marketing and promotion standpoint. The
Definitely.
big thing for us right now is we are expanding our talent pool. I think the sports industry is going to be surprised at some of the talent that we're bringing in. Our board has made a great investment for us in talent. as well as equipment and gear. So our CBS and Paramount Plus games are going to be interchangeable from a production standpoint. And so our job is to make sure that the production team down at Vista and the people that we're hiring are all prepared to do that. So that's number one right now. Talent, we're getting our 6 cameras HD and trucks at every match that aren't CBS matches. And then VAR. So VAR, integrating VAR, the technology at the stadiums all the way through to Vista and then to Hawkeye and Atlanta and back to the stadiums. We had our first VAR training 2 weeks ago at IMG in Bradenton with our officials and also working with Vista from a production standpoint. So VAR is big for us. As you said, the media rights negotiations are ongoing. We don't know where we'll be in 2024. CBS has been an amazing partner with us, so we'll see how that flushes out. Internationally, we're also focused on where we're going to be in 2023 because there is no Twitch deal. So we're having conversations with global distribution partners and also preparing. If we don't have a global distribution partner, then we're prepared to air the games on NWSLsoccer.com. So that's, if you look at, again, the off season, that's what we're doing right now. Those negotiations are happening again in real time for 2023 on what we want to do. Have hopefully some exciting announcements to come out about that very soon, and our talent lineup. So there's a lot, and the things I'm looking forward to is being able to. We've upgraded our production from a producer standpoint, from a talent standpoint, from a graphic standpoint, and bringing and executing those starting March 25th, the weekend of March 25th. So getting all of those things together, we are going to have an off-season boot camp with all of our production team members because it is so new for a lot of them, as well as the expansion of the games and educating on VAR. We did make sure that we're credible in all aspects of VAR before we go into the season.
Nice. A fascinating time for the league. Brian, it's been fun seeing the impact that you've had in the year that you've been with the league now. So we appreciate you taking the opportunity to reflect on both the NWSL draft and this offseason for the league. If you want some more information on what's going on with the NWSL, Brian and I were actually on a panel together at last month's SVG Summit discussing the league's productions and the general rise of women's sports. You can watch that session in its entirety now over on our video platform, SVG Play. That's at svgplay.sportsvideo.org. And of course, for more on the National Women's Soccer League, you can go to NWSLsoccer.com. And as Brian mentioned, the league returns on March 25th. So we'll be excited to see the ball get kicked off again and for another exciting year of women's soccer here in the United States. Brian, thanks so much for taking the time. We really appreciate joining us, and good luck with everything this offseason.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to it.